RVSS budget meeting. And John, you want to do a roll call, please?
Wayne Brown, Mike Burrow.
Here.
Jim Snyder.
Present.
Gary Hall, Mike Parker.
Here.
Jim Lewis.
Present.
Kay Harrison.
Here.
Terry Sackett. Terry Sackett.
Yeah, I'm here. Let me see. I guess
Yeah,
I'm
we hear you.
muted somehow.
Mike Parsons.
Here.
Dick McGregor.
I'm here.
Great.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. We appreciate you taking the time to come to the budget meeting. And now we're going to have election for the chairman of the budget, and then we'll have election for the secretary of the budget committee. And I'm opening up for nominations for the chairperson. Was Mike chairperson last time? Mike Burrow?
He was last year, but
Yeah.
he told me he might need to leave early, so.
Anybody want to nominate anybody for the?
I'll nominate Mike Parker.
Oh, stop it.
Second.
He's a buddy of mine.
Thanks a lot.
Okay,
Just second.
yeah, Jim Lewis
Jim Lewis.
seconded it. So,
No, I
Mike
didn't.
Parker- Jim, what did you say?
I did not second. I thirded.
Oh, okay.
I seconded it. I think he'll make a great chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, all in favor of having Mike Parker as our chair, say aye.
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 All right, Mike, you're it. And so you can go ahead and take it over and get nominations for secretary.
Okay, I'm entertaining anybody. Just speak up and let's have a secretary.
Now, this is Jim Lewis. I nominate Kay.
I'll second that.
Good.
Okay, it's been nominated to have me as secretary.
No,
and-
you're not in charge anymore, Mike.
That's
Mike's
right.
running the
Never
meeting.
mind.
Now, take it away. You're doing it great, Kate. Kate, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Okay, Kate, you're our secretary.
Okie dokie.
Where do we go from here?
Next item on the agenda is reading of the budget message by the budget officer. And that's me.
Good. Good.
So I've got the document up on the screen. Hopefully everyone can see that. And I'll go ahead and read the message. Okay. I'm pleased to present Rogue Valley Sewer Services budget for fiscal year 2022. This is a balanced budget where our resources equal our requirements. Every year we submit our budget to the Oregon Municipal Finance Officers Association and the Government Finance Officers Association for review and critique, and happy to report that once again we received the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award from GFOA. Our top priority is to maintain a balanced budget in accordance with state law. In so doing, it is our policy not to use debt to finance any of our operating expenses. We remain consistent with the policy and will not be using debt to finance any operating expenses. RVSS maintains an active capital improvement program that is designed to ensure adequate capacity and to rehabilitate older sections of pipe before they fail. At this point in time, we do not have any capacity deficiencies in the system. Our rehabilitation program calls for the replacement of approximately 2 miles of pipe per year. This work is funded through a combination of system development charges and rates. Revenue trends. A year ago, we were in the beginning stages of a global pandemic that has now claimed the lives of over 500,000 Americans. Fortunately, Jackson County has so far largely avoided the worst of the disease. The rate analysis from last year indicated that a 90-cent per month increase was warranted, which would have brought our single-family rate up to $22.40 per month. The board chose to forego this increase in order to help businesses and individuals who are suffering from the economic fallout from the pandemic. On September 8th, 2020, a fire raged through Talent in Phoenix, destroying over 2,000 homes and 100 businesses. Overnight, RVSS lost nearly 5% of its customer base, and we are expecting our sewer rate revenue will be well below budget for this year. In response to the fire, we shifted most of our field resources. We shifted our field resources and most of our capital budget to the recovery. To date, we have spent nearly $1 million in fire-related projects, and this number could increase to over $2 million before we are done. Our rate analysis for the year has taken these factors into consideration and recommended an increase in single-family rates from $21.50 to $23 per month. And that chart kind of shows the last few years of history on that. A recent survey of 124 sewer service providers in Oregon revealed the average residential sewer rate of $52.93 per month. Our residential rate remains among the lowest in the state. Special items of interest. COVID-19. The pandemic has dramatically changed the way we do business. Our office has been closed to the public for much of the past year. We are doing more work remotely and have instituted various measures to limit the potential for infectious disease spread in the workplace. The economic fallout does not seem to be as severe as initially feared. We have not seen any significant drop in revenue as a result of the pandemic, and we were able to take advantage of the Federal CARES Act, which reimbursed us for most of the additional expenses related to mitigating the disease. The Almeda fire on September 8th destroyed over 2,000 homes and 100 businesses in Talent, Phoenix, and the surrounding area. This represents roughly 5% of our customer base. For the year, we're projecting sewer service revenue to be about $250,000 or 2.6% below budget. Our storm drain fund, Fund 10, will be even harder hit with a projected reduction of nearly $50,000 or 12% of the budget. The immediate damage from the fire was the destruction of the Arborwood pump station and one of our flow monitoring stations. We also needed to locate and cap sewer service laterals to the burned buildings to prevent debris from fire from entering the sewer. We have to date spent approximately $750,000 on these repairs, and we expect to receive about $60,000 from our insurance provider and $490,000 from FEMA. The FEMA money has not been committed yet, so we are not fully confident that we will receive this. For stormwater, we have installed inlet protections on all of the storm drains in the area and done some hydro seeding to prevent erosion into the streams. These efforts have cost almost $100,000, and we have a commitment from FEMA to reimburse about $21,000 of that. Finally, the fires opened up an opportunity for us to correct some pre-existing problem areas. We have already eliminated backyard main line on Rapp Road and are working on a project to eliminate a creek crossing near Gagnon Street in Talent. We are also pursuing a rebuild of the sewer system in Oak Valley subdivision, as discussed below. The Oak Valley subdivision was constructed in 1994 to mobile home park standards. This was unacceptable at the time, and both RVSS and DEQ ordered the developer to bring the system up to public sewer standards. This never happened. The Almeda fire destroyed all of the homes within the subdivision, and as people start to rebuild, there is no legal sewer available for them to connect to. To correct this, RVSS formed a reimbursement district to construct a new sewer. Upon connection, each homeowner will be responsible for their equitable share of the construction cost. The RVSS Board of Directors has agreed to support the project by limiting the assessment to 50% of the project cost and offering slightly better financing options for the homeowners. Medford Treatment Plant. The new discharge permit for the city of Medford includes strict limits on nitrogen and phosphorus. This will likely require the city to construct new treatment processes to meet these limits. This will be a very expensive project and will require significant rate increases in the coming years. The city is working on a facilities plan to determine the full extent of the improvements. There will be a small increase in the treatment rate of 3% for fiscal year 2022. This is unrelated to the anticipated capital expenses. Our capital improvement plan. Most of our capital improvement plan for fiscal year 2021 was derailed by the Alameda fire. Our plan for 2022 is largely a repeat of what we hoped we were going to do in 2021. Debt service, with the annexation of Shady Cove, we've taken responsibility for their outstanding debt. This increases our total debt service to approximately $510,000, which is 4.4% of our general fund revenue, assuming the proposed rate increase. We do not believe that this level of debt will cause distress. Shady Cove, we are proposing an increase in the sewer rate for Shady Cove from $44 to $45 per month. 75% of this revenue is used for treatment operations in Fund 50, and the remaining is transferred to the general fund to support collection operations. White City Lagoons generates revenue from tipping fees charged to septic tank and grease interceptor pumpers. Surplus from the White City Lagoon Fund is transferred into the Treatment Capital Reserve Fund 55. We are budgeting a surplus of $200,000 for fiscal year 2022. We have submitted plans for approval to DEQ for a significant upgrade of the lagoon. The improvements will create 3 smaller, partially mixed lagoons, drying beds, and a site for future composting facilities. This will dramatically increase the effectiveness and capacity of the lagoon and allow us to remove the limits on the amount of waste we receive from pumpers. A side effect of these improvements is that we will open up a large portion of the south sill for enhancement of bird habitat. The area has long been popular with bird watchers, and we are working with several local organizations to develop a management plan that will enable us to regulate the amount of water in this area to create more suitable habitat. Gold Hill, we are in the 4th year of our 5-year management agreement with the city of Gold Hill. We expect to begin discussions on the future of the relationship this summer. The city will also need to decide in the coming months whether or not they want to rebuild their treatment plant or to construct a connection to the regional system. Based on information provided by the city's new engineer and the expectation of increases in treatment rates, I no longer believe that the regional connection is in the best interest of Gold Hill. Staffing. We are not proposing any increase in staffing for the coming year. We are beginning to reach the limits of our current labor force, and I expect the coming years we will be looking to increase staff levels, particularly in stormwater engineering and our information technology departments. I would like to thank each of you for taking time out of your schedule to participate in the budget process. Your input and insights are extremely valuable in helping us remain responsible and a responsive government agency. Our Finance Director, Brenda Baldovino, and I am available to answer questions you may have on the budget, and please do not hesitate to call us if you have questions or concerns. So that's the message. So then the next step is presentation of the budget. And typically what I'll do with that is I'm going to go through page by page the budget document. There are certain areas that I have highlighted that I want to have a little further discussion on. But if anybody has any questions on any particular items or concerns, stop me because I'll keep going all the way through otherwise. Are we ready, Mike?
I'm ready. I hope you are.
Okay. Let's do this. Okay. Our history and background has not changed. Nothing significant has changed in the past year. Our mission statement is to manage, maintain, improve storm and wastewater systems to protect and preserve public health, quality of life, and economic vitality in our community. And I think we've done a fairly decent job of doing that this year. I'm going to go through a lot of this stuff pretty fast because a lot of it's, definitions, informational things. But like I said, if there's anything that jumps out that you want me to elaborate on, I will certainly do that. Our budget calendar, obviously we're in the budget meeting right now. We have, if we have follow-up meetings, we've got time set aside for that. And The final approval by the Board of Directors would be in June at the regular board meeting. Budget process, that's unchanged. Our service boundaries have not changed since last year. Our organizational chart. Okay. So this page, all funds combined, and I am on page 18 if you're following along on yourself. One thing I want to highlight on that is you can see a decline in beginning fund balances. You can see a slight decline in total revenues from 20 to 21, and that's primarily related to the impacts of the fire. Like I said, we did have, significant portion of our customer base was destroyed in that, and it's coming back, but it's, we're going to notice that in this year's budget. Pie charts. Okay. So this is one of the ones that I like to highlight. This is just a breakdown of where our revenues are coming from. And you can see, almost all of it, 73% of our total revenue comes from service charges. So that is a critical component. So when we lose a big chunk of that, it hurts. And then this one shows kind of where the money's actually going to. And, in general, over the years, we've kind of been this level of breakdown where, we have kind of three big main factors, which is our personnel services, our treatment charges, and our capital projects. And then, smaller slices for materials and for debt service. So, that's kind of a nice ratio that I like to see. I mean, it's nice that the capital is still one of our bigger expenditures because that shows that we are making improvements in the system. Resources, okay, these next few pages are primarily summaries of what we're going to go into a little bit more detail as we move on. Let's see. Transfers. Okay, one of the things that, and I'll get to this when we get to the general fund, but I do want to talk a little bit more about what we mean, what the transfers are and how they all relate to it. You've got the transfers in and transfers out, and that's kind of money that's shifting between funds. And we'll address that when we get to the individual fund discussion. Okay. Now we get into the heart of it. Our general fund is the, that's where we receive all of our revenues for service charges. That's where we pay all of our personnel services. Most of our capital projects, most of our operations is all run through the general fund. So this is the main one that we're looking at. Let's get past here. Okay, so, and I am on page 29 now, if anyone's following at home. So one of the things I want to highlight just at the very get-go here is normally when we're preparing the budget, we are focusing, we do our projections based on our December totals for the year. And this year is crazy. With the impacts of the fire have made the projections, a lot more difficult than they normally are. So my overall level of confidence that our projected for 21 are going to be accurate is not as high as it normally is. But traditionally and normally we do try to make our projections very conservative. So if we do make errors, it's usually in the right direction. But that's just something to keep in mind as we go through this. The next note, again, I mentioned this earlier, but on our service charges, you'll see that we're projecting about 2.5% lower service charges revenue than we had budgeted. And again, this is all tied to the fire. Our SDC revenue is actually, I expected a bigger decline in SDC revenue, and we're not really seeing that. My expectation after the fire was that most of the building capacity was going to be dedicated to rebuilding there, and we would not see as much happening like in Eagle Point or White City. But that really hasn't happened. It's still going on. It's really busy out there right now. So that's good news. We are still building, and you know, there's a real good chance that our total SDCs will end up meeting our budget projections. So the reimbursements item, and I want to explain what this is a little bit more. When we do capital projects, you know, we have expenses related to that. Sometimes it's, you know, and it depends on the nature of the project, but, you know, if we're doing a design work, then we've got, you know, Nick's, our engineer's time is going into that project. If we're actually physically doing the construction, we've got our crews out there doing the work. And the way we budget that is the money is charged to the specific project, but since those wages are paid out of the general fund, we transfer on paper, you know, the money from that capital budget back into the general fund to offset those labor expenses. So you'll see our projections here are quite a bit higher than what the budget was. And what's happening there is this is tied to the fire, because the bulk of the work out there we did, I mean, we put all of our crews out there to do work, and we capitalized that. And so, you know, that labor that's going into the fire recovery, that is expenses are charged to the project for the fire, but it's reimbursed back into the general fund. So this number is going to be quite a bit higher than it has in years past. And I don't anticipate, you know, we'll see a repeat of that. So next year we'll kind of go back down to normal levels. Moving down, we have a line item here for COVID grant revenue. And last year under the CARES Act, we were eligible for reimbursement for certain expenses related to the pandemic. So this paid for things like, you know, our masks and hand sanitizers, and, you know, we put up plexiglass screens in the office, that sort of thing. It also paid for the wastewater testing. We took samples of the wastewater and tested it for coronavirus to see levels there. And it also paid for labor expenses if we had people on quarantine. So last year had that $54,000. You know, right when things started getting crazy in April, we ended up working like half shifts and things like that, trying to, you know, to meet up with, you know, what the recommendations were as far as distancing and that sort of thing. So we had some big labor expenses for sending people home and not having them work. Basically, and that got reimbursed. A much smaller amount got reimbursed this fiscal year, because, you know, once we kind of started getting a handle on it, you know, we had a couple of instances where we had employees who either tested positive or were exposed to people, but ultimately tested negative, but we had to quarantine that. And so we did incur some expenses on that, but not much. And that's what this item here is. That's the reimbursement for that. While we're on that topic, I just want to note the most recent relief package that the federal government put out includes payments to local governments. But so far in Oregon, none of it's coming to a special district. Cities are getting pretty nice checks out of this, apparently, but the special districts haven't gotten anything. And SDAO is initiating a letter writing campaign to try to convince the legislature to share some of that with the special districts. So if you've got the ear of a legislator, you might want to mention that to them. The late charge item, when the coronavirus pandemic hit, we suspended late charges or stopped charging late charges altogether. My expectation is that starting in July, we'll resume that and reinitiate the late charges. So we don't have hardly any revenue shown for that for this year, for the current year, but for next year, we expect to be kind of back up to the normal levels with normal behavior. Okay, so the transfers, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier. So with each fund that we have, when we do work on that fund, this is like the labor and equipment expenses that are dedicated to those particular funds. And since our labor and equipment expenses are paid out of the general fund, the money that's allocated to those other funds is transferred back into the general fund to reimburse for those expenses. So that's what all of these items are. And on our expenditures, I'll go through, this is just a summary of the expenditures, but we'll go through in detail. So any questions on our resources for general fund yet?
No.
Okay, I'm going to move on. On our personnel services, there's not a whole lot to report on that. I was made aware, and some of you might have caught that. But if you look at on our medical and dental insurance, it looks like we're having a decrease from last year, and that is not necessarily the reality. One of the things that we bumped into on top of everything else this year is that the way pay periods fell, we ended up with an extra pay period in the first half of the year. So when we did our projections, it overinflated what some of the costs were being. We caught most of them, but we didn't catch this one in particular. So the reality is on these items, let's see if I can highlight them. Anyway, for the medical and dental insurance, they're going to come in real close to what the budget is. I mean, we pretty much know what those costs are. That's one that it's easy to predict. So at the end of the year, we'll find that these are going to be almost right on target with what we had budgeted. And what that does overall to the general fund is that our ending fund balance is actually going to be about $80,000 higher than what we have shown on here. And but aside from that, as far as the salaries and everything else, there's nothing unusual to note there. Again, on our staff levels, we don't expect any increase in the staffing levels for this immediate year coming up. On our materials and services budget, it looks like we're going to end up maybe a little bit over budget for the year on this, real slightly. And the one item that's really jumping out is on the safety program. You see some extra expenses there. And I think what happened here is, we had to do, we spent a lot of money on COVID protections and things like that. And the CARES money ran out. So we ended up, with, I think overall for the year, we got reimbursed by about $160,000, but there was another $40,000 or so that we didn't get. And that was just because the fund itself ran out before we were able to collect it. So that's where that little overages comes from, and it's not real significant. I mean, it's right about $40,000. And then I highlighted the treatment charges again, and I'm going to repeat this probably a couple times through here. The issue with the Medford treatment plant can potentially be a big deal. And what's really happening out there is they actually got sued by an environmental group for violating their treatment permit, their discharge permit. And it's kind of an odd thing because the permit has specific numbers, so you can't discharge more than X concentration of phosphorus and of nitrogen and things like that. But it also has a section in the permit that says you can't do anything that has an adverse effect on the river. And that's really broad. And so, they've done numerous studies that have showed that the aquatic life immediately downstream from discharge is adversely affected, and there's things going on there. So, I'm not privy to all the details of what's going on with the lawsuit and how that's going to work out. But the bottom line is they are going to have to make some very big changes to address the amount of phosphorus and nitrogen that they discharge. And it's an entirely new treatment process that from what they have. So, it would not, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if the treatment rates had to double, within the next 5 years. And possibly even more. So this is, we talk a lot about how low our rates are. One of the main reasons our rates are one of the reasons our rates are low is because our cost of treatment is really low. And this is going to bring our cost of treatment, a lot higher and a lot more in line with some of the other communities. So we are going to see this, I want to say it as much as I can because I don't want anyone to be surprised when it happens. So, enough of that. Let's see. Moving on our capital projects, you'll see again, we're expecting an increase, on how much we're going to spend. We expect to go over budget on our capital projects. What I don't have in this is any kind of reimbursement from FEMA. And I specifically did not include that because I don't know if they're going to give it to us or not. I mean, they say they are. I signed 2 more requests this morning, and there's only 1 left that's outstanding. And supposedly they've approved it all the way through, but until I see a check, I'm not going to believe it. That will offset some of this. And then, you see there's a pretty significant increase for next year. One of the issues that we run into is that the change in fiscal year is right in the middle of our construction season. So a lot of times, and you'll see this, we actually have to double budget some of the bigger projects because we don't know exactly, are we going to pay for this off in June, or we're going to pay it in July or August? So, there's a lot of overlap in there. So when we get to the actual numbers, they almost always are going to be lower than what we are projecting and what we're budgeting just because of that. On the other capital that's not infrastructure, let's see. We got a new TV van this year. We replaced some other vehicles. Let's see if there's anything highlight this. The TV van was the big one. For next year, it's time to replace our dump trucks. Those 2 dump trucks that we have, I think they were 2005. Terry might remember, but they work nice. One of the things we bump into is that, we get past when parts are available for servicing them. And so we're kind of at that stage right now. So it's time to replace those. So we're going to replace both of the dump trucks. And then the walk behind easement flusher. I'll call on Terry on this one because he's the only one that might have been around when we got the old one because it's old. It predates any of us that are still working here, and it's in pretty rough shape. So it's time to get a new one of those. And then the generator, again, this is the generator that we have was bought used. I think we bought it from the city of Talent used about 30 years ago. And again, we had an issue with the fuel pump went out on it this last year. And we kind of did a nationwide search through junkyards to find a replacement for it. So it's, we depend on these things, and they need to work when we call on them, and we can't be doing that. So it's time to replace that one as well. And then paint of interior building. Well, that's happening. So we're moving forward with that. So that's our capital.
What
Yes.
page are you on now?
I'm sorry, I'm on page 35.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, and I'm moving to 36
Hey,
now. This is Jeff.
Carl, that's supposed to be paint exterior of building.
That's exterior?
Yeah.
Exterior.
Okay.
That was scheduled for next fiscal year. We're doing
Okay.
the
Yeah,
interior
we're
under
doing
this
the
fiscal.
Yeah, we're doing the inside right now. We're going to do the outside next year. On our debt service, again, our debt service is extraordinarily low. So, yes, Kay.
I have a question on that because I was looking in several different places. There's a different percentage of what the debt service is.
Okay.
And so I didn't know if it was because of what it was corresponding off of or what, because in the budget message, you have 4.4.
Right.
And And then on one of the, on the expenditures, on the graph, the pie
Uh-huh.
chart, it has 3%.
Okay, so
And then on page 26, it has 1.2% of sewer service revenue.
okay, so,
So we have different numbers.
okay, and, all right, so, let me explain all of those.
I figured there's an explanation.
Yes. So what I have in my budget message is I'm taking the entire debt service that we pay. So
For
we pay debt out of 3 different funds.
Right,
There's debt in the Shady Cove Fund that we pay. There's debt in Fund 7, which is our regional interceptor fund, and there's debt in the general fund. So all those 3 combined is the $510,000 a year that we pay. That number is 4.4% of the revenue that we get into the general fund. So that's what that number is.
okay.
The 1.2% that you have on page 26, that is looking at the debt the debt that's in the general fund compared to the service charges in the general fund.
Okay.
So if I go back down to, what was it, page 30? 36, you'll see the debt service out of general fund is only $105,000.
Okay.
So that's what we're paying out of the general fund. So that's what that number comes from. And then where was the other one?
Then, the pie chart has 3%,
Okay, and that was in, let's see,
and that's on, page 22.
22. So that is all funds. Okay, that is a percentage of the expenditures. So the first 2 ones we're comparing the debt service to revenue.
Okay.
This is how much of the expenditures is total debt.
That's kind of what I thought, but I wanted to make sure,
Yes.
because, yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other questions on general fund? That's the biggest one, and that's the one that takes the most time. So the other ones will go a little bit smoother. So the Bear Creek Interceptor Operation and Maintenance Fund 4. This is what we use to do the operations of the interceptor system itself. And this is just a big pipe that connects all the cities to the treatment plant. We, as part of our agreement with Medford pays us a fee of, I think it's 12 or 16 cents per ERU per month. And then we pay a similar amount. Actually, the amount we pay is a little bit higher, and it's based on how much of the flow goes through the Dunn pump station. But we get about $50,000 a year from Medford. We transfer in about $200,000 from our customers, and that goes into the operation of the interceptor system. Most of that money ends up getting turned over to Fund 6, which is the fund that's used to manage the big pump station on Kirtland Road, the Dunn pump station. So the interceptor itself doesn't take a whole lot of work. Because it's a big pipe, it's not something that we're out, we do try to go through periodically and TV it and flush it and adjust manhole lids and things like that. But overall, it's a fairly maintenance-free facility. So it doesn't take a whole lot of expenses. Every now and again, every few years we put a big effort into going through and making sure it's all TV'd and flowing clear. But for the most part, it's not a huge expense. And from this fund, we typically transfer about $150,000 into Fund 6, which I'll go to next. And Fund 6 is the Dunn Pump Station Operation and Maintenance Fund. And so this is the big pump station on Kirtland Road. It serves not quite half the valley. Most of Central Point goes through there, Jacksonville, West Medford. it all drains through this pump station. So you see the, kind of the big expenses is, the power. We spend about $45,000 a year on power for that. And that's a more hands-on. I mean, we have a person on that site at least once a day, just to make sure everything's working. So there is a lot more work that goes into maintaining that pump station. So that's all paid for, funded from a transfer from the Fund 4, which is the overall interceptor fund. Again, in both of those, we have nice healthy balances in both of those funds, so we are doing well there. And then the last one that's on the interceptor system is the capital expansion. So in this particular fund, both RVSS and City of Medford pay $1.05 per ERU into this fund, and this fund goes to whatever capital projects we have related to the interceptor. And we've got some big ones. The main one really is the pump replacement project, which is ongoing. We've got about $2.2 million, and you'll see this one's being budgeted twice because when we were preparing this budget, we weren't sure exactly when it was going to be paid for, and it's going to split. It's going to straddle. We were hoping to have it all done this year, was our goal, but it's not going to happen. It's going to wait. It's going to be August or September before it's all completed. So. That one is being budgeted twice just because of the way the years go. And that's the complete rebuild. We are, right now, there's 300 horsepower pumps in there, and we're going to pull them out, and we're going to end up putting 4, I think they're 215 horsepower pumps. But it's a pretty significant project, and it's time. We're kind of limping along on one pump right now. We could fire up the other ones, but we don't trust them very much. they're in rough shape. This project is due, and it's a big one. And then we've got money in there for upgrading our flow monitoring systems as well. And this is another area where we have debt service. This is the biggest one. We've got about $200,000 a year that we're paying in debt here. Any questions on interceptor regional facilities? All right. So let's move into stormwater. We have two different stormwater funds. Fund 9 is the White City Storm Drain Fund. And this one dates back to about 1989. We were asked to create a district in the industrial side of White City to manage their drainage system. And we had an agreement with the county about division of authority and things like that within the White City area. We've updated that recently, and under the old agreement, it was kind of weird. Like, we were in charge of all the pipes, and the county was in charge of all the ditches, but not the ditches if they weren't by the road. So we got rid of that, and we just basically said, we'll take care of the whole thing. It's not a problem. And again, there's not, we have great ambitions on upgrading some of the storm drainage systems out there, but we do have difficulties, just being able with the labor capacity to get things designed and built. And you'll see, we were hoping to have quite a few projects done this year. When the fires hit, we just pulled those all off the shelf because there was just no way we were going to be able to do that just with the staffing we have. So we're going to try to get those fired up again for next year. And this particular fund is focused primarily on capacity issues. So it's where we have drainage issues where things don't have capacity in the pipe, that sort of thing. And again, this one is funded, the way the billing on this is kind of based on land area and things like that. So we pull in about $70,000 a year from White City, and ideally use that for upgrading their drainage systems. And again, we do have a pretty healthy balance in that fund. Our next stormwater fund is Fund 10. This is a stormwater quality fund. And just, you can see here, this is, we have a surcharge on our sewer bill that pays for this in the cities of Phoenix and Talent, and in parts of Jackson County. There's the EPA defines what they call the urbanized area, and that's what falls into this. So places, White City falls into it, and some of the fringe areas fall into it, but some of the areas that we serve that are further out are not part of the storm drainage district. And you'll see, our revenues in Phoenix and Talent are going to be way off from, from what they were in previous years. So this is the water quality program that Jenny manages, and this is really focused on. I mean, we have a permit through DEQ for this. We have requirements for doing public education, public outreach. We have to do some illicit discharge monitoring work. One of the things that Jenny does every year is does stream walks and takes water samples and just looks for sources of contamination into the streams, and it's been a real successful program. So it's worked well. One of the things that we do on here, and you'll see on the capital side of it, is there has been a pretty big push, pretty much from the beginning of the stormwater program, to try to find more regional approaches to stormwater treatment, and it's been a real challenge. And we've identified areas that might be suitable, and sometimes we get them to work, sometimes we don't. And I do need to note, we are currently in negotiations with Mike Burrell, who's on the budget committee, on some property that he controls in White City that we're hoping to get a regional facility. So Mike would declare a potential conflict of interest on that.
Yeah, I want to make sure that we get it in the minutes that I declare a potential conflict of interest here. And then I haven't reviewed any of your conflict of interest policies. So if anybody on the board has any recommendation on how we deal with that, I'm open to that.
Yeah. So it's a potential conflict of interest, which means that it has the potential to be beneficial to you. But it's not an actual conflict of interest, because no decision you're going to make today or anyone's going to make today is going to make that project happen. So the actual approval of the particular project is going to be done by our board of directors. So that level of separation, means that you don't have to recuse yourself from any decisions today.
I am comfortable with that as long as that's in the minutes and all the board is hearing it. So that's good for me.
Okay. So anyway, we do have some other projects identified in here that we're trying to work on. The Cummins project is down here called Q013. That's one in Talent that Nick's been working pretty hard on, trying to negotiate with the property owners. And we're still holding out hope on that, but we're kind of a little bit of a stalemate right now. But our one of our big goals with the stormwater program on that is, every property, when you develop, there's requirements for meeting water quality standards now, and it can be tough, especially on some of the smaller lots, to be able to get detention and retention and treatment facilities in. And if we can find ways to go a little bit off-site from there and do more of a regional approach that encompasses a bigger area, it's a lot more efficient and effective. And so we're always looking for opportunities there, and I'm hopeful that we'll start bringing some of these into fruition. But again, overall, this is one of those funds. We do budget quite a bit for capital projects, and it's tough. It's been tough to get some of them off the ground, but we do have a pretty healthy balance in here, and so hopefully we'll be able to start completing some of that work. Moving away from stormwater into treatment, start with Shady Cove. Our Shady Cove Treatment Fund is Fund 50. The money for this comes from the residents of Shady Cove. We collect a monthly sewer charge from them. We take 75% of that, put it into Fund 50 to take care of the treatment system. We take the other 25% and put it in our general fund to take care of the collection system. The plant's running well. It's a nice plant. It's in fairly decent shape, and we are keeping it going, I guess, more than anything else. You know, we did recently, last year, we budgeted for an additional operator for the treatment plants. So now we're up to four operators plus Kevin, three operators plus Kevin. Yeah.
All right.
So it was a bit, you know, we were working those guys a little bit too hard. And so we've got an extra person out there, so that's going to help a lot. But the plant is running well. We're meeting all of our permit requirements. We're making really nice, high quality water. So that's good. You know, the treatment, the budget itself, I mean, this is one of the tighter ones. This is one of the harder ones to keep balanced. And Kevin has to really focus on keeping costs under control because there is a lot of labor involved and there's a lot of, you know, other expenses associated with that. So that one's doing well. Moving on, Fund 55, this is our treatment capital budget. And, you know, we transfer surplus from Fund 50 and from our lagoon fund, Fund 70, into this treatment capital fund. There's, you know, we got a big influx right after the annexation of Shady Cove. Shady Cove had been saving a capital reserve fund. And so part of the annexation was that those funds were turned over for us to put into a capital reserve fund. So that was about $700,000 that we got last year. So we have a pretty healthy balance on here. We do have some pretty significant projects identified. You know, for this year in Shady Cove, you know, we made some upgrades on their solids handling equipment. We're replacing a lot of that equipment. We replaced, what was the other one? Was that this year? Did that go into last? Oh, that was last year. Okay, the disc filters went in last year. We did have, you see this $42,000 here, lightning strike, and we're getting reimbursed for that from insurance, hopefully. But yeah, we had a lightning strike last summer that blew up transformers and a bunch of other stuff. It was kind of a fair amount of damage caused by that, but that's all been repaired. Out at the lagoon, let's see, for the next year, you know, we're looking at switching away from chlorine and going to ultraviolet light for disinfection. And we talked a little bit about that last year. And we thought that we would kind of do a transitional thing where we go from chlorine gas to sodium hypochlorite, which is a powder form of chlorine and is a little bit safer and easier to manage. And I think we're moving away from that, and rather than just take that interim step, is to look at going straight into ultraviolet light, which is the $25,000 that we have budgeted for that. That's not going to build it. That's going to be our design work. But you know, it's a little bit of a more involved project, but it's a much safer and much more reliable approach. So we're going to look at that very seriously. One of the things we have started to do is there's a lot of repair work that goes on that's not necessarily identified or identifiable. That, you know, so we put this $150,000 in the budget. Like if a pump breaks, we need to replace a pump. You know, we've got that budget already allocated for that. So that, you know, makes it a little bit easier to track those sorts of repair works. Moving down at the lagoons, you know, this L003, it's labeled compost project, but it's not quite the compost project. That's the whole upgrades of the lagoon project where we're going to be building new cells and everything. That's a big number, and we'll see if we end up spending it all. I mean, you know, a lot of this work, it's not real time sensitive. So my plan is really to use our forces when we have availability, and a lot of it's going to be just pushing dirt around. So I don't expect that we'll spend that much, but it's, you know, that's kind of what it would cost if I contracted that out and had someone do it. And, you know, one of the reasons I put that in there is, you know, there is a possibility with the stuff that's going on in Washington that there's going to be some infrastructure financing available. And I wanted to be positioned that if it became available, I'd be able to, you know, make a claim on it. It's a little bit of a different approach from a lot of stuff we've done in the past. But, you know, one of the things that, you know, if we go way back, you know, 2009, when they did a big, they called it the ERA, the American Recovery something or other. DEQ at that point had about $60 million that of grant money for sewer projects that they were going to donate, you know, give to people. And they had requirements on it that you have to be shovel ready, has to be, you know, a series of requirements. Well, I had 14 projects that I put in for, and I got squat. And I was looking at that recently, and I wrote a real angry letter to DEQ about it, because it was pretty clear that the criteria that they laid out for eligibility was not followed, and we should have gotten some. But anyway, that's my own pain. But, and you know, I guess what I'm saying is I don't expect to spend anywhere near that amount of money, but I do want to have that identified as part of our plan, in case we have an opportunity to take advantage of it. If it happens, we'll see. But that's that. This one that we call Lagoon Public Access, that's the one we're actually have an agreement with the Audubon Society and the Watchable Wildlife Foundation and the Mace Foundation. And these are the bird watchers, and they're out there all the time. They like going out to lagoons. There's you know, certain birds that they can only find there in the whole county, and they spend a lot of time there. And so we have a strong interest in keeping them out of our way. And you know, and the way to do that is kind of direct them to where they should be. So this $25,000, we've hired a consultant. We're paying, I think, $8,000 of that, and the other groups are paying the rest of it. So we'll get reimbursed for that. But you know, this will identify kind of where we want to manage water levels in that south cell and how we want to do things there. So it's an interesting project. You know, we'll see, you know, what comes of it, but it could be a real nice feature out there. So that's our treatment capital fund.
Carl,
Yes.
Dick McGregor here. I'm wondering if I could ask you to just step back one step. Is that compost project under the lagoons, was that something you referred to as the Comfort Project? No.
I don't. No, I called it compost project. That's kind of what it got named when I first started thinking about it a couple of years ago.
Okay.
But this is, and I can. Hold on a second. I'm gonna turn this share off and put a different share on, and I can show you exactly what it is.
I misunderstood it. It is compost. I heard comfort.
Yeah. So this. Let's see. I'm gonna share my screen again. Okay. So this is our lagoons, and all, you know, this stuff in blue. So this is kind of a really big picture. So right now, the way the lagoons operate is, you know, this north cell is full of water. We have septic tank trucks that come in into this. Can you guys see my cursor?
Yes.
Okay. So they come into this area down in here and empty their septic trucks, and it goes into this north cell, and it's treated, it's taken care of. But we have limitations on how much we can put in there, and especially with grease pumpers. You know, you'll see a lot of times, especially in the winter time, we get these big rafts of grease floating in there, and they take a while to break down. It's kind of a bad deal. And we have specific limits. I mean, there's times where we have to tell them we can't take any more today or this week or whatever. So what we want to do is eliminate that. So what this plan will do is it'll create these 3 smaller cells, and these will have aerators in them, so they can treat a much higher capacity of waste than these 3 little ones compared to this big one that just sits there. So that's the primary part of the project, is to develop these 3 cells. When those are in, we really won't have any limits on how much waste we can take. The next part of it is drying beds, because eventually you're going to fill these things up with solids. So we want to pump that out, and we want to dry the sludge so that we maintain our capacity. Once you've got the dried sludge, then the last phase of it really would be to turn that into beneficial reuse, and that's where the composting comes in.
Okay. Now,
So that's the end of it. Yeah, and then the remainder of this south cell here, that's the area that we would manage for bird habitat.
okay,
And so we have no more use for it. So the way the water would flow is go from cell 1 to cell 2 to cell 3, and then discharge into the big one here. And then we would be able to regulate how much of this water ends up in this south cell. And that's what we have the consultant telling us, okay, this time of year you want, 6 inches of water, and this time of year, whatever it is. That's what that project is.
okay. On the tail end of that, very quickly, you mentioned you were thinking about possibly being able to get some money from DC for infrastructure. Would that apply to districts and/or cities?
Well, potentially. I mean, so the issue there, and obviously nothing's been approved by anybody yet, and and we have no idea what the final package is. But based on what happened last time they did a big project like this, they put out, just tons of money into the states, and then the states were responsible for distributing that. Right. And it's a question of how they would do it. And if it comes to fruition, I would expect that the cities would probably get a lot more than the districts, because that's the way things always work. What I want to make sure of is that we're in a position to take advantage of it if it comes about, and that's one of the things with the last one that really and even though it didn't affect us, I think one of the biggest tragedies of that is Gold Hill, because if they had been able to act promptly and get their stuff in there, they should have easily qualified for a bunch of that to get their sewer system fixed. But they were unable to. And one of the things that infuriated me most about that is pretty much of that $60 million, I mean, it all went to Clackamas County and Tualatin Valley, fill in the blank. I mean, we know where it all went, and none of it came down here. And that was I was talking with Nick a few weeks ago about this, and I actually pulled out the letter that I wrote, and it was one of the angrier letters I've ever written. It was anyway. So I mean, as far as cities are concerned, I mean, obviously, this is really speculative at this stage, because we really have no idea, if anything is going to get approved, or what it's actually going to look like. But I just want to make sure that we are. We're in a position where if something similar to what happened in 2009 happens again, that we're ready to move on it quickly.
Okay, thank you, Carl.
Okay, moving on. I mentioned Gold Hill. Let's talk about Gold Hill. Like I said, we are in we have a year, basically a little over a year left on our contract with Gold Hill. And so we need to start talking about what's going to happen afterwards. Their city manager, Jessica Simpson, is trying to step aside. So they're trying to hire a new city manager. I think Jessica's plan is that she would stay on as the city clerk, which was her job before she became city manager. and they would bring in a new city manager in July is what she told me her goal is. And so whoever that person is, that's probably when we're going to start discussions on what happens with our contract moving forward. My personal opinion right now is that I think the best thing would be for us to extend the contract for long enough to get them time to finish their requirements under their order from DEQ, which is getting their treatment plant taken care of. And, then would be the time that we would, talk about, doing an annexation vote if that's the direction we want to go there. So, we're not engaged in any discussions right now, but, hopefully they'll get a new city manager and hopefully we'll be able to sort that out with the new city manager. Kind of sad to see Jessica go because, she's good. She's really made a big difference there in the time she's been there. So hopefully, her replacement's going to be equally good. Anyway, on the Gold Hill fund, Fund 60, they pay us $360,000 a year to take care of their system. Most of that goes to the treatment plant. You'll see this transferred to 65. 65 is the part that we dedicate to the collection system. And this last year, we actually, there was some surplus in that fund. And so we used that to do a couple of collection system upgrades. So that was beneficial. That plant is a tough plant. It's really, it takes a lot of love to keep it working properly. And, getting that whole thing fixed is going to be a real benefit. It's a hard one for Kevin to keep in compliance because it's just so many little things that don't, aren't as good as they should be out there.
Hey,
But
Carl,
they do have a new question?
you were mentioning a possible extension of the contract. You're talking something short term, like 6 months, or something longer, like 2 or 3 years. Any idea?
I think it'd be more like 2 or 3 years because they need to get something done with the plant, and they haven't even made a decision on what to do yet. So it's probably going to be several years. I think the direction they're going to go is to refurbish the plant. But basically, if it's made out of concrete, it's probably in decent shape, and if it's not, it's going to get replaced. So it's a fairly big project, but they'd be looking at a year or more of design work, and then a year or so of construction. So it's I think 3 years is probably the soonest that something like that would happen. And I don't, I think long term it's in everyone's best interest for them to annex, similar to what Shady Cove did. But I don't think it's a smart idea to do that before they've completed those improvements. And I talk about like my fear of what rates are going to be for us. $100 a month rate in Gold Hill is not going to be too surprising. They're, you're looking at millions of dollars of improvements for a town that has 1,200 people in it, and that's going to be tough. And I think their chances of getting grant money is a lot better if we're not annexed. Okay, so that was Gold Hill treatment. The other next fund is 65 is the Gold Hill collection system. Mostly that, we still do the routine flushing and TVing in Gold Hill now, just like we would in our system. I did highlight the 2 projects that we did, 5th Street and Riverside. We went in and did some mainline replacements. They spent a lot of money before we got out there up to, supposedly upgrading their collection system. And they didn't get their money's worth, unfortunately. And so like the one on Riverside, actually, it was a 6-inch pipe that they slip lined with another 6-inch pipe, and it had really bad grade, and it was causing backups and everything else. So we went through and just replaced that. And then the one on, it says 6th Street, but I think it's 5th Street. That's up by the school. I don't know how they missed it. There was like a big gaping hole in the side of the pipe, and it didn't get included in their project to upgrade things. So we went through and we fixed that one for them also. Okay, that's all for Gold Hill. Moving on, the last one is Fund 70, which is our Lagoons Fund. And this one, you know, we do generate quite a bit of revenue from the septage and the pumpers that come out there. I mean, they dump about over 2 million gallons a year on us, which is nice, and that's a nice source of revenue. And you can see, you know, we're projecting $200,000 surplus that we're going to transfer back into our capital reserve fund for the current year, and at least 180 for next year. And you know, I try to be very conservative about this fund. I don't want to, you know, anticipate more than what we're going to get, and so, you know, there's always a good chance that we're going to end up with more surplus than what I have projected, because to me, this is kind of found money that I don't want to rely on for any of our operations or anything. So that's why, you know, I want to keep it focused on capital stuff, because it's a, you know, you don't want to, I don't want any of this to be committed to ongoing expenses. Question, Kay?
Yeah, and we're only taking septage at the lagoons. We're not taking it out at Shady Cove any longer?
Yeah, we're authorized to take it at Shady Cove, but we're not. I mean, it's hard on the plant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what my understanding was, is we decided not to because it was more beneficial not to.
Yes, and it's a lot easier for the pumpers at the lagoons too.
Yeah.
So again, that's our operations at the lagoons itself, and that's all of our funds. And so that's kind of the primary way we budget. The rest of the document, we have basically the same numbers shuffled and separated by our departments. So to go through those real quickly, our administrative department is our front office. You know, that's me and Joan and Brenda and her team, and Carol and her team that does all the finance work and permitting and that sort of thing. Okay, so I mean, these are the costs in our administration department. Again, all of this is just stuff that's in the other funds. It's just packaged a little bit different way. Our next department is our IT, which is Carol, and we have a GIS specialist who, and just to give a shout out to David, you know, when the fire happened, you know, right after it happened, you know, we were kind of like, you know, we got to do something. What we got to do? We got to, you know, we knew there was a lot of stuff that needed to be done. He created an app for our tablets for our field crews to go out there and actually do quick assessments and, you know, which places are damaged and that sort of thing, to help us know, you know, when we had to go in and cap laterals. You know, it was, the county ended up doing something very similar, you know, to tie into their tax database, but we were faster than them in many ways. you know, so and a lot of that stuff has really helped us with our tracking. Like, you know, with my work with FEMA, they asked me, you know, I need addresses for the work you did. I'm like, well, it's 700 houses that we kept laterals on. Well, David had it. I mean, you know, because of the app we did it, we were able to give them coordinates of all of it. So he's done a tremendous job for us this year and really stepped up to help us with the firework. So anyway, like I said, our IT department really, that's Carol and David, keep all of our systems running. We do have a you know, I mean, you know, a lot of the budget in here is all licensing and things like that we have to maintain. Moving on, the engineering department, that's Nick and his team. inspectors, we have a new engineering tech. Dick does all the design work for our projects, does all the plan reviews. You know, it's a busy place these days. Our stormwater quality, that's Jenny and her team. And, you know, they're responsible for, you know, they do plan review on the stormwater quality stuff, you know, a lot of the monitoring and, you know, a lot of the big push this past year is we recently got a new updated permit that has new requirements. So they've been working on updating our design manual and things like that. So there's a lot of coordination with other cities and with other groups that go on in that project, in that department. Okay, so there's the numbers there. But the Department 40 is Shane Operations and his team. You know, that's our biggest department. And so, you know, we do all of our TV work, our flushing. We have a construction crew. You know, we have our fog program that we have to implement. So it's, you know, they've been tremendously busy. I mean, you know, we pretty much threw everybody at the firework. And, you know, for 6 or 8 months, that's pretty much all they did. They really got to see a lot of that and did a tremendous job of getting our part of it taken care of. Let's see. Okay, so there's the numbers there. Now comes my favorite pie chart of all time.
100%.
I love it. I'm going to make that joke every year. And it's going to be funny every time. Department 50 is our construction department. And so we put all of our capital projects in there. And this is just kind of a way that we can see, you know, how much we're putting into capital projects across all of our funds. And it's a lot. I mean, you can see, you know, you're looking at close to $7 million for next year. Again, a big one of that is the $2 million that's going into the Dunn pump station. You know, we do put a tremendous amount of our budget goes into capital projects. And one of the things, you know, that I think is great about that is, you know, when the fire hit, if we didn't have that, I mean, you know, if we were operating where, you know, our budget was just covering our operations and we didn't have a big capital budget like that, we would have been really in bad shape because, you know, we wouldn't have been able to, you know, cancel this project to go over to here because all our money's already accounted for. So it gives us a huge amount of flexibility in a situation like this to adjust quickly to this type of a situation, which I hope we never see again.
Me too. But for the type of community we have and the widespread we have, it works out perfect for us.
Yes. Yes. Our treatment department, this is Kevin and his team. Yeah, we've got a total of 5 people. Yeah, Kevin plus 4 other guys. And like I said, you know, they're in charge. They take care of the Gold Hill plant, the Shady Cove plant, and the lagoons. So that is a busy job. And that's one that they have to be out there 7 days a week. So, you know, getting that 4th person out there really makes it a lot easier to do the scheduling on that. So again, doing a good job out there. There's our numbers there. And then the rest of the budget is kind of different projections and that sort of thing. So our cash flow projections, you know, when we look at our rates every year, kind of what we look at is what we target it so that we'll have a positive fund balance at the end of 5 years. So you'll see some of these negative balances in the interim years. And we don't worry too much about that when we're doing our projections, as long as, you know, the first year and the last year are positive. We'll figure we'll sort out the middle years as we get to them. And it seems to work out well that way.
So far, so good.
So far, yeah, it's a, and really, this is part of, how our capital budget is, because sometimes you'll have a $7 million, year where you're spending a huge amount on capital projects and maybe not so much the next year. And so, to iron out those variations, we just look ahead 5 years and make sure that it all balances at the end of 5 years. And we do. We expect to have, it looks like about a $400,000 balance at the end of 2026. Moving on, this is a list of all the projects that we have in our capital improvement plan, just in very brief description and cost estimates, and you can look through those. And we have those on a spreadsheet also when I get to it. So this is really our capital improvement plan going forward to 2026, and how much money we expect to spend on these any given year. And it's pretty aggressive, and we've always been very aggressive about that, and that's a good thing. I don't know if there's any real unusual or noteworthy projects. The Oak Valley Reimbursement District, which we have down here at the bottom, in the middle of page 103, budgeted $785,000 for that. Because it's a reimbursement district, we expect to get about half of that back from the homeowners. So, and that's we've awarded the contracts, and we're in the process right now of getting the contracts executed. What else is noteworthy here? The grinder pump project, that it's kind of a miscellaneous grinder pump. We have about 100 or so, maybe a little less than 100 of these step tanks in the system that are just they're problematic. And we're looking at if we can replace them with gravity system, we're doing that. We've had a couple of projects where we've gotten rid of some of them, but where we can't, we're trying to standardize those and put in grinder pumps rather than the septic tank pumps. The grinder pump, they're interchangeable. So if a pump, we have a spare pump on this shelf. If one fails, which they rarely do, we can pull one out, put the other one in, and be done in a couple hours. We don't have to go out and pump the sludge out like we do with the step tanks, so they're less maintenance, and it's just a more reliable system. So that's kind of an ongoing project over the years. We have a goal to try to eventually get rid of all of them. Again, on our Fund 7, the Dunn Pump Station, that's the big pump replacement project. So that's that one's going to be nice when that's finished. That one's a real headache right now. We got some stormwater quality projects. We've got some lagoon projects that we've already talked about. Our vehicle equipment replacement schedule is here. This is, what Shane does to make sure that we always have our equipment in good working order. Like I said, we got a new TV van last year. This year, the plan is the dump trucks. Moving forward, next year, Shane's looking at replacing some of our pickups. And we're looking really, really hard at the electric trucks these days. The prices are becoming more competitive, and reliability is, pretty good on that. And, one of the things, when we installed solar power at this office here, we did it based on kind of our historical consumption rates. And we didn't account for the fact that we've done a lot of upgrades to be more efficient. So we actually, every year, we give a lot of power back to the grid for free. So having more electric vehicles would actually be a good way to use some of that power rather than give it back to the power company. We do have 2 small cars, that Chevy Bolts, that are electric, and we've been real happy with them. They work really well. I drove one of them up to Bend without any issues. You know, drove it to Bend, charged it, brought it back. Then I got daring and I tried to go to Salem, and I made it, but I mean, I made it just based on, you know, good intentions towards the end there. It was happy thoughts that got me over the line. So that's probably the, you know, I would not recommend anyone try to go that far. But for our local stuff here, you know, we have plenty of range. You know, this next year is obviously, I think it's too soon, but, you know, Shane's really on top of looking at the options and the development of those electric vehicles. I think that's really going to be the way to go for the, you know, the ones that, you know, like our inspectors trucks and things like that, that, you know, they get a lot of mileage on them. And to, you know, the maintenance on the electric cars, I mean, you know, they are more expensive right now to purchase initially, but the overall maintenance is so much less. I mean, there's really almost no maintenance on them, you know, aside from changing tires. So I think that's the way of the future, and you know, here in a couple of years we'll probably get there. And then, you know, looking forward, you know, just change projections on when we're going to need to replace some of the other vehicles. And of course, the big ones are always the flusher trucks.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. This is our staff levels, what our pay scales are, and how many people we have in each department. That's something, you know, every year in June, you know, we adopt an ordinance, a resolution that establishes the pay scales, and those are all, you know, we typically adjust those based on cost of living and that sort of thing. So we did do a compensation study last year.
Yeah.
And, you know, we made some adjustments to certain positions. The market's changing fast, and, you know, you know, you look around and you see, you know, what's happening, you know, with water commission hiring and things like that. And there is going to, you know, I do suspect there's going to be more wage pressure, just the way the market is and how wages are moving. But, you know, we're not planning to do anything significant this year, but, you know, in the coming years, like I said, I think there will be more pressure on that front.
You're going to have more people trying to upscale with your people,
They're trying to do what?
to get your people. I mean,
Oh,
because-
yeah.
and that's why the wages will go up, because there'll be less people to do these
Yeah.
really cool jobs.
Yeah, and you know, and some of them, like, you know, treatment plant, I mean, we had a hard time filling that position. We advertised for it, and we actually hired a guy last September, and he lasted 2 days. You know, so it's a bit of a tough job, and, you know, the certification requirements on a lot of them are tough to meet, and that's, you know, I mean, if you're in Oregon and you have a level 3 treatment certificate, you can write your ticket. I mean, you can go to work anywhere because they're really in short supply, and there's a great need for them. So, you know, that is definitely going to be a challenge moving forward. Moving on, our history of accounts. I just wanted to highlight this and to show that, you know, how many bases we lost. I mean, you know, from March 2020 to February 21, I mean, we're, how much is that? 1,600 mobile home park spaces lower, you know, and a bunch of single family homes. I mean, the fire really, you know, it's definitely going to show up, and we're going to see the effects of that for a long time to come. Let's see, moving on. This is our debt schedule. So this does not include what we're paying for Shady Cove, but this is our general fund and our Fund 7 debt. And these are the bonds that we refinanced. When did we do that? That was a while ago. But yeah, like I said, it's really low. We have a real it was 2013. We did that.
Oh,
We took all of our debt in 2013 and there was really low interest rates, so we combined them all. So that's what this is. And we don't have any plans to take in any more in the foreseeable future. This is just some historical data on our sewer rates, our permits, how much money we're receiving. What else do we got here? This is again debt service. How much we? Oh no. Oh, okay. These are our total expenses on different categories. Some statistical reports that we include in here. It includes, how many projects we're doing, how much miles of pipe we have, and that sort of thing. I do a much more detailed report that I usually put out in September that has, a lot more pages to it. But this is kind of a summary of how operations are going. And again, just highlight, how many residential accounts and industrial accounts we declined in the past year. And, that's a big deal. And a glossary of terms, and we are done. So bottom line is, I think we're in really good shape. We are asking for a rate increase going from $21.50 to $23 in our core area, and from 44 to 45 in Shady Cove. We are not proposing any SDC changes, and all of our funds have positive balances and are strong. That's all I got, Mr. Chair.
That was very quick. Thank you. It's never quick, is it? So do we want a proposal that we approve all this proposed budget? Are we ready for that vote?
Mr. Chair, this is Jim Lewis. I move adoption of the proposed budget for fiscal year ending June 2022.
Thanks, Jim. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Let's go roll call, please.
Mike Earl,
Yes.
Jim Snyder,
Yes.
Mike Parker,
Yes.
Jim Lewis,
Aye.
Kay Harrison,
Yes.
Terry Sackett,
Give us a thumbs up or thumbs down,
Terry.
or unmute. Okay.
Mike Parsons,
Kind of laugh.
Mike Parsons,
Yes.
Dick McGregor.
Yes.
So passes unanimously. Now, do we have anything else that we need to cover, Carl?
That's all we need. We can adjourn. We'll repackage, put this all back together as the final budget, and it'll come to a hearing in June. And Mike Parsons has his hand up, so he might have a question.
Mike,
It's not
what do you got?
It's not a question, it's more of a statement. And just want to say, despite the epidemic and the devastation of all the wildfires, it would appear to me that our RVSS remains to be a well-positioned company. And that's a tribute to you and your staff, Carl.
Thank you, and I'll make sure I relay those comments to everybody.
Well, I think make sure you do, because I think that's a very important part of it. You're well organized. It always goes very smoothly, as smooth as a budget can go. And great job.
Yeah.
Do I hear well, I'll just give it out, and let's do I hear
You're the boss.
someone? Okay, I'm the boss. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Good
Thank you,
job.
guys.
Good job.
Yeah.
Mike and Kay, there'll be something in your envelope at the end of the year.
This is still being recorded, by the way.
Bye,
I'm gonna
gentlemen.
stop for now.